April 14th, 2021. Do I have confirmation of quorum? Mr. Yates.
Yes, indeed, Mr. Chairman, you do.
Thank you. I'll call the meeting to order. And at this time, if you indulge a minute or two, myself and Director Jules is going to go out into the boardroom and have a little presentation. So hang tough. I'll be right back.
Can we somehow get that put on full screen rather than having the agenda in front of us or whatever? If there's going to be some kind of.
Yeah, Edith's gonna do the swap here.
Great.
It's our inaugural use of using our IT equipment in the boardroom here, so.
Oh, wow.
Try this, guys.
Oh, yeah, we can hear that.
Me okay?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon. I'd like to start off acknowledging that we are here today in Cam River on the unceded territory of the We Become First Nation. And we're thankful and give respect for them being stewards of the land. I'd like to recognize that Strathcona Regional District, or SRD, is also located in the Chalice, Coast Salish, and Claw-Claw-Kewok traditional territories. The SRD looks forward to building stronger relations with all 10 First Nations in our region. We are committed to being more inclusive with our neighbors, consider common interest, and be mindful when making decisions that may impact them. Today, we have the privilege of welcoming Cayuga-Tecumseh First Nations, KCFN, as full members of the SRD Board of Directors. The Cayuga-Tecumseh First Nations treaty lands are located within the boundaries of the Strathcona Regional District. In the Monmouth Treaty, KCFN signed in 2011, there was direction for the nation to interact and join local regional districts. KCFN has been the SRD Board of Directors board observers for a few years now. We're honored now to have KCFN as a full voting member and active partner in the SRD board. Of course, pages fit together. Participating in 2 regional district services with consideration of others in the future. KCFN has the same rights, responsibilities, and obligations as other regional district members, and the KCFN citizens are entitled to the same rights and respect as SRD residents. This is a very important step towards building strong relationships and working in cooperation with shared goals. KCFN is the first to join the SRD, and we hope this leads the way for other First Nations. Together in partnerships, we'll make our own path forward and open hearts and minds to tackle challenges and creating opportunities. To mark this occasion, we'd like to present you with a gift, handcrafted locally from wood representing all the areas of the regional district. As we embark on this journey together and joining separate pieces of wood together to create this piece of art is a great representation of our communities working together as one. And Director Jules, this is the gift.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone here today. It is an honor to be here on behalf of the Cayuga-Tecumseh First Nations. I'm Kevin Jules. I'm an elected legislative member and the vice chief of our nation. And this is a long time coming. This is something that we are very proud to be a part of. I'm just a small piece to an even bigger puzzle, and I'm proud to be a part of this Strathcona Regional District and to be welcomed by everyone It has been amazing, and I remember I grew up in Campbell River as well as Cayucot. Throughout my life, I was back and forth, and I remember growing up on Octis Island, and me and my brother would be down there every morning as soon as the sun came up, and low tide. We were down there getting eels and bullheads, and now growing up in Cayucot and having graduated from Cayucot, I'm proud to sit on our board and be the First Nations to sit on the Strathcona Regional District, and open doors for many more people. I just want to thank you, and on behalf of our nation, we have this beautiful piece of art which was done by a local artist, Priscilla Jack, and that is actually our staring out of our bay, staring up west, and it's a beautiful sunset. Thank you, everyone, and yeah, I'm proud to be here. Thank you.
We'll go back to the meeting now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was just wondering before we begin if it'd be possible to actually see those pieces.
Now you can.
Didn't you see him there when they?
Hey, board.
Saw a bit of it.
That's the problem with mass. So at this time, with your indulgence, board, I want to open up the floor to directors on a couple words of welcoming Director Jules to the board. If anybody wants to say a few words, please put your hand up. Director Davis.
Okay, I'd love to start by welcoming Cayuga-Checklasset First Nation to our board. I'm looking forward to more First Nations joining the board. I think in the long run, it's going to give us a greater balance of views of things as a society, and it's just a great sign of where things are going, and I'm really looking forward to working with Kevin. Thanks.
Thank you. And I've got Director Kerr.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome Director Jules, Kevin, to the SRD board. I sat beside you for the last, well, I guess in principle the last few years, but got to know you fairly well. Second of all, I'd like to thank everybody for contributing wood to the project. The 10 trees in the circle symbolize the 10 jurisdictions and geographical areas in the SRD and unite them all into one piece of art. So thank you, everybody, and welcome, Kevin.
Thank you, Director Kerr. Director Mogul.
Thank you. Yes, I want to welcome Director Jules to our board. And I want to also say that just to reiterate what Director Davis said, I think this is a really momentous occasion to have the First Nation at our board. I think it augurs well for the future, and I'm very much looking forward to what we may be able to achieve together. So welcome.
Thank you, Director Mogul. I don't see any other hands up. Director Anderson.
Thank you. I think that it's just fantastic, and I really, as I said at the joint board, want to commend the Cayuga-Checklasset on, I'm sure, generations of effort towards becoming your own governance and having treaty and joining us in this way. I can only imagine that it's been a massive undertaking, and really honor the work that it's taken you and your forefathers and your elders to get here. I also know that this board has been really committed through its First Nation Relations Committee and the recent hire of our First Nations coordinator to work in a good way. And I really look forward to any guidance and perspective that you might offer at this board. Welcome.
Thank you, Director Anderson. And Director Jules.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to thank everyone for the kind words, and also to thank Ron Kerr for taking on the role of the project. I mean, that is an amazing piece. I just wanted to say thank you, and thank you to everyone, and looking forward to our future.
Thank you. Do I have any others?
You're heading off to the store?
Director Kerr, do you have something else? Seeing none. So I'll just a couple of personal notes. I remember back in about 97, 98, 99 was on a school board, and we were up in Cayucot, and they had the first graduation class, and I just asked Director Jules what year he was, and I believe you said, Kevin, 2000 that you graduated, and it was very nice. I think he was the third class of graduation students for School District 84. So it's great. And I mentioned the Principal Nick, we called him. He was a great principal for Cayucot and well loved. So and going back in the recent years as an employee of the school district, going up doing maintenance work in the summertime and seeing the change of the Cayucot area and the band, it's just amazing the amount of work they've done, in the last few years especially, and look forward to all their projects coming forth in the future. So again, Kevin, welcome, and it's a great day for us all. Just add just one last note. We got a email letter from Mr. Osborne last night to the board, thanking or wishing us congratulations on this momentous occasion today. So saying that, we'll move on to regular meeting. Can I have the adoption of the public agenda, please?
Move adoption of the agenda with one little minor addition I'd like to put forward. I noticed in today's newspaper that Marlene Wright's husband Al passed away, and I think it would be great if our board could send her a card or some flowers, as she served on our board for quite a while and on the Strathcona Gardens Commission, and I know that she's going through a difficult time, I'm sure.
CAO or Tom, do we need that in the minutes, or do we just have direct?
It's just a direction.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's fine. Okay.
So move adoption.
Second.
Thank you.
Wally.
Thank you, Dr. Wally. Thank you. No further additions. I'll call questions. Anyone opposed? See none, carried. Petition delegations, Discovery Island Salmon Farm. This time, Mr. Quaxi, President of Little River Enhancement Project, or Enhancement Society, and Vice President of the Roy Creek Salmon Enhancement Society, will make a presentation regarding Discovery Island salmon farming.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Kozakowski, sorry, last minute advice, he could not make the meeting, so we're attempting to reschedule.
Thank you. Moving on. Adoption of the minutes for the regular board meeting, March 24th.
Move adoption, Wally.
Second.
Director Wally, Director Cornfield, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have one minor amendment on resolution 278/21. I believe that Director Abrams seconded that. It doesn't note anyone seconding my motion.
Thank you. Mr. Yates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We record the minutes faithfully according to what the video shows. So if there was no seconder, then that's what the minutes reflect.
But if we voted on it and it carried, somebody must have seconded it, and I believed it was Director Abrams.
But it was carried anyways, correct, Mr. Yates?
Yes, as shown.
Okay, so that's as of the minutes, Director Lee.
That's Yeah,
What
but
motion was it and what page?
it's 278/21.
Yeah, but what's the motion?
Okay, I gotta pull it up on my laptop. Can
Coming
the
up.
staff just read it out?
27821, the liquor and cannabis regulation branch be advised in writing that the SRD board recommends the assurance in the non-medical cannabis retail store licensed to Pacific Seaweed located at 2207 Glenmore Road, Oyster River.
Right.
The only one opposed is Director Wally.
Okay, so someone seconded it.
Sure,
And
Correct.
so
Must-
could we,
must have been me.
yeah, so can we amend to, yeah, it would have been Director Abram. So can we amend that so that there's no glitches? We've had one glitch to the Oyster River Cannabis Retail Store already, and I want this to
Okay.
go through
I'll go to Mr.
properly.
Yates. Mr. Yates, do we need to amend it to have a seconder?
Mr. Chairman, I don't believe you do under your procedure bylaw, which relies on Robert's rules. If the chair accepts a motion and it is voted on and it is declared as passed, then whether or not the seconder is even recorded is just a matter of your procedural bylaw. In this case, there was no record of a seconder. It was nevertheless debated, voted on, and passed and declared as such. So we're simply recording as staff what we believe actually happened.
Okay.
The board feels that it was incorrect, and certainly you can change it.
Mr. Chair, I believe it's incorrect, and I believe that if I had made a motion that wasn't seconded, that the chair would have said that my motion was, was defeated due to a lack of a seconder. And Director Abram did second it, so I'd move that the minutes be amended to add Director Abram to the SRD 278/21 resolution.
Okay, do I have a seconder? Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? There none. Question on the motion? Anyone opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the adoption of the minutes is amended.
So moved.
Director Lee, Director Cornfield. Any other discussion? I'll call questions. Anyone opposed? Carried. Any business rising from the minutes? No public considerations, no notice of motions. Chair's report, the only report I had was the recognition from Mr. Osborne, which I've already stated. Consent calendar, nothing. Committee reports. First Nations Committee. First Nations Relations Committee.
Move that the draft minutes of the regular meeting of the First Nations Relations Committee held on March 24th, 2021 be received.
Thank you, Director Portfield. Director Abram, was that you seconding it?
Davis. Sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Davis. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? Hearing none, carried. Under staff reports, First Nations addition to reserve policy.
I'll move that the report from the Chief Administrative Officer be received.
Thank you.
Second, Wally.
Thank you. Director, Abram,
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, just on the idea of a policy, I realized that the First Nations Committee recommended that there be a policy. I'd just like to state that really the policy should be that they will be handled on a case-by-case basis. Everyone I've ever seen has always been different. So it's pretty hard to, develop a policy that is going to cover all bases if each one is going to be different. So could we not just have a policy that says we will deal with the
you're talking
addition to reserve? Pardon me?
Mr. Chairman, if I could.
Just going to say,
Mr. Yates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So The good points being raised. I do believe, though, that if the board passes this resolution, then staff would bring back a draft policy for the board to look at, and they could then add, subtract, or amend as the board sees fit.
Okay, thank you. Director Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As a director who's recently gone through the addition to reserve process fully, I know that the federal government has policies in place that basically guide the addition to reserve process, and it is a federal process. They pay little attention to local government, and we're forced to follow the federal guidelines. So I think that this recommendation should be sent back to staff with a view to liaising with the federal government, Ministry of Aboriginal Affairs, as to what their policy is and how our policy could dovetail with theirs. Because we had a lot of problems in Area D with the addition to reserve process, in that my community was not happy with the proposal, but the federal government pushed it through anyway, and it wasn't a very good process, in my opinion. So I think we need to defer it back to the staff and look into the federal addition to reserve policy, because that's the one which predominates our policies.
Okay,
So,
so once we're done receipt.
Mr. Chair, if I
Hold on, guys.
I got my hand up.
Yeah, well, when I recognize you.
Yeah, I'm just making sure you've seen it.
So what I'm about to say is, once we're done receipt, Director Lee, if you want to put a motion forward, then do so. So I have Director Anderson, Cornfield, Mogul. Director Anderson.
Thank you. In addition to what I've heard other directors say, which I concur with, I would imagine that a policy wouldn't necessarily recommend support or non-support of any individual application. That would certainly be on a case-by-case basis, but I would really love to see that the very first time we see an addition to reserve application, that it's not just from the feds and then we have to send it back to staff, that it come with a covering staff report that lays out any basic considerations around servicing or taxation implications or those sorts of things, so that we can then dig into it the first time we see it with a little bit more information. And I trust that's where you're headed with this. If it's otherwise, I would appreciate hearing from staff. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to jump to the CEO. Do you want to speak now?
Shit.
So I'll just quickly add, Mr. Chair, that the direction from the First Nations Committee was to create a policy in line with the federal policy.
Okay, thank you. Director Cornfield.
As chair of the First Nations Relations Committee, and attached to the document on this agenda, Director Lee, is the entire policy from the federal government. It was attached there so that people could read the whole thing. It has come before us before. It was referred from this board to the First Nations Relations Committee, but it does not fall within our mandate. If the board wishes us to make a determination on the add to reserve, then fine, we can do that. But right now it's not in our mandate. Under the federal government process, the addition to reserve policy attached, if you read there, it will tell you that consultation with local government is mandatory. It is required, and it specifies everything. And it was provided to the entire board so that you could see that. It is not our role as First Nations Relations, in my opinion, to go through and evaluate that proposal. And what we do lack is a policy of our own as to if it's in, as this case was Director Anderson's, what role does the electoral area representative play versus what role does the board play? And that was what we directed back, because it's impossible for us to answer, and to send it back to staff to look at the policy. It's there in front of you. You have it. And that consultation process required. So pardon me if I'm getting a little frustrated, but we said, you asked us to look at it. We looked at it. We had lots of debate about it and said we need to get a policy. In that direction needs approval of the board. If you don't want a policy on how to deal with it, then fine.
Thank you. Director Mogul.
Thank you. I'll sort of reiterate what the Director Cornfield said, but perhaps a little bit. I think what this is being asked for, it's a process as to, it's a policy as to process, not a policy as to do we support or not support. It's what is the process that we will follow when we receive a request to comment on an addition to reserve. And I think it's really important that we have such a policy, because otherwise we would be dealing with each one, as we have in the past, on an ad hoc basis. And so, as Director Cornfield has mentioned, for instance, if a addition to reserve is solely within the geographical location of a electoral area director, what role does he or she play as opposed to the whole board? So we do need policy as to process. This is not policy as to yay or nay. So that's my my take on it.
Great, thank you. Do you have any other first time? I don't have any other speakers.
Yep.
Director Wally?
Director
Oh,
Abram.
my hand's not up.
Director Abram, I don't see your hand up, sir.
Yeah, well, it's up. It was up. There
Well,
it is.
I don't see. It's up
I
now.
don't know what,
Okay,
there.
go ahead.
Okay, well, it just keeps disappearing. I think you guys must have a delete hand button.
No, it's your finger.
I'm not going to speak to that one. Okay, so I think what Director Mogul just said, much more calmly than Director Cornfield said, is fine. I think that if we're just, Mr. Yates actually said it quite well. This is basically just saying, send it back to staff, bring back a policy to us, and we can nix it or endorse it or whatever we want to do. But the fact that Director Mogul recognized that there will be some issues that will be strictly or could strictly be electoral area based, or there could be some issues that would be entire board based. I think that was very astute, and as long as that is included in the policy that Mr. Yates and his staff will bring back, I would be able to have a policy that actually recognizes us as different entities and possibly having different needs and desires. So I can support it on that. I wasn't going to support it completely, but I am now.
Okay, thank you. Any other first time speakers? Seeing none, Director Lee, do you want to?
I just wanted to say that Director Cornfield can calm down, because I do know that policy. I worked through it with the addition to reserve in Area D. There were issues in the federal policy that never did get addressed. Area D, through the Electoral Area Services Committee and the board, had 43 concerns about servicing the site, about what we can do to help the service. There's no transportation, no schools, no water, no sewer, lists of things. How are we going to harmonize our bylaws so that we are all on the same page regarding activities such as hunting on the site in the middle of the residential areas? And none of those issues were addressed by the federal policy, or they're in the federal policy. They just don't themselves follow their own policy. Okay. So we didn't get any of those issues resolved Not even anything as basic as water.
Okay,
Nothing.
We'll work on it. Director Cornfield.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, I get a little frustrated at times. The item was referred to the committee. The committee had considerable discussion about it, and we looked at what happens if it's an electoral area, what happens if it's inside a municipality and everything else, and there is no policy. What happened with Clowetzies and unresolved issues happens because we didn't have a policy and we didn't have anyone on staff to look at those issues. We now have a First Nations relations staff person, and that can help guide us through. And it's appropriate that that policy gets brought back to the board so that those things don't happen, which is one of the tasks that you gave us as a committee. And this is the committee's report. It has nothing to do with the actual application there, but saying how should it be developed or how should it be responded to. And our recommendation was we need a policy developed by staff.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move on receipt. I'm going to call question. Anyone opposed?
Mr. Chair?
Director Ingram.
Yeah, just one real quick one. It was referred to the First Nations Committee, but it was also referred to the Electoral Area Services Committee. It was not just referred to one committee.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. Okay, question on receipt. Anyone opposed? See none, carried. On the B.
Move to refer to the Electoral Area Services Committee and then bring this back as and when you get a response from them.
Do you have a seconder?
So if I can, Mr. Chair, if I go back a little bit in time, this originally came to the board referred it to EASC and First Nations Relations. First Nations, which is odd that we can currently do that, but we did. First Nations then has come up with a recommendation for a policy. I'm not certain. Now, once we have that policy, that will come back to the First Nations Relations Committee. Is it Director Lee's intent that what are we referring back to electoral areas? I'm not certain.
Well, I believe the original motion was to refer it to both electoral areas and First Nations.
Which we
but
did.
I've never seen this on an electoral areas agenda. So
we just talked about it 20 minutes ago. It was just on this morning.
Mr. Chairman, if I may try to clear up this confusion. There's really two things at play here. One is the actual application that the board was asked to respond to, having to do with the Who's First Nation. That is a separate issue from the question of how do we process ATR applications in general, and that's what the recommendation from staff before the board today is dealing with. It's not dealing with a specific application. It's dealing simply with how to best and most efficiently process these things as they come in. So this is a recommendation from the First Nations Relations Committee, which was asked to comment on a specific application, but felt that this was also an important thing to inform the board of.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we had a motion moved. I didn't hear a seconder, so I'm going to go to Director Mogul.
Thanks. So we don't have a referral motion on the floor. Just we're back to the actual.
Yeah.
Creating the policy. Okay. I think I just want to say that I think we're making this much more complicated than it has to be. All that is happening here is that we've asked staff to come back and put together a policy that would allow the board to know how to process these applications, the ATR applications as they come in. As Mr. Yates has said, it's in no way, shape, or form presupposing or prejudging or presetting anything as to individual applications. It's just, we should have a broad and uniform policy on ATRs. I think it's a good thing. When the policy comes back, the draft policy, there may be directors who think, oh no, we should be doing a bit more of this or a little bit less of that, or whatever, But I think first steps first, let's come up with a draft policy. That draft policy will obviously go to EASC.
Right.
Well, you know, obviously. I mean, when I say obviously, I mean, I think it would be clear that would have to go to EASC for their input. So I think this is just the first step in getting to where we need to be to have a policy that that everybody understands. This is how we deal with ATRs.
Okay,
So
thank you.
if I can, just for clarity, so, and again, this is a bit of a confusing one because we've referred it to two committees consecutively. The First Nations has made the recommendation to create a policy. I don't think we need to do anything else. Going back to EASC is redundant. The draft policy will come to the board. All EASC members are on the board. All First Nations members are on the board. So I think if we just pass this policy, this recommendation, the staff will bring it to the First Nations Relations Committee, get their comments. That will come to the board where all members will get to discuss, debate the draft policy.
Okay, thank you. Director Abram, do you have your hand up?
Yes, I do.
Is it new?
Not to disagree with our CAO, but I think, you know, most of what you said is what should happen. But it should be going back to EASC because of what Director Mogul said, where there may be policy issues that are specific to an EA, policy issues that are specific to the entire board. So is there any harm in taking a policy, going off and creating a draft policy and referring it back to EASC and the board, or EASC, First Nations and the board, just to cover all bases? Is there any problem?
I would suggest that we can discuss that once the policy comes to the board.
But
Okay.
then we'd be sending it back from the board back to EASC, which would delay it another month. If you just took the policy that you create and put it on both agendas, then the timeline is shortened considerably.
Okay, so right now, we don't even have a motion that a policy is going to be addressed. So until I have a motion on the floor, we're not going to move any further ahead. So I'm looking at item B, that a policy which addresses the processes for dealing with addition to reserve proposals be developed for the board's consideration. Do I have a motion to do so?
I'll move B.
Director Mogul.
Second, Baker.
Thank you, Director Baker.
And I'd like to make an amendment.
Go ahead.
I'd like to make an amendment. Okay, the
Correct.
amendment would just be, yeah, I'm trying to read it. That a policy which addresses the process for dealing with addition to reserve proposals be developed, comma, referred to the EASC
You're changing the motion. That's
and
what
the First Nations. Pardon me. Sorry.
Sorry, by doing that, you're changing the motion. That's not an amendment. The motion on the floor is.
Point of order, Mr. Chair, any director on the board can make a motion that changes or amends a motion. It's totally legal. Director Abrams is entitled to make an amendment and see whether it passes or not.
Okay, so your amendment is
Pass the motion, how can I amend?
Okay, I don't know what's, Director Abram, I'm having a very difficult time hearing you. So you seem muffling back. So the only amendment you're adding is you want this referred back to EASC before the board?
Yes, that's it. But it just be referred to EASC and then the board.
Okay.
That's the amendment.
Second.
Second been called. Director Mogul.
I wasn't sure Mr. Chair, whether you had ruled the amendment out of order or not. So I was going to speak to that.
No,
but if you're not going to,
no,
okay.
it's fine.
I think what Director Abrams is getting at is that instead of process-wise, instead of the draft policy coming to the board and then getting referred to the two committees again, that we just do it. And I don't really have a difficulty with that because I don't think it's unreasonable that whatever policy is put together will probably would go to EASC anyway. So this just eliminates one further step. So I don't really have a difficulty with it because the committee and the First Nations committee will want to look at it, make comments back to the board. So in the big scheme of things, I don't think this is unreasonable amendment.
Okay, thank you. Director Anderson.
Thank you. I'm going to concur with the CAO on this one and speak against the proposed amendment. This would be a policy of the board. It's not very common, I don't think, that we refer draft policies to various committees. I think it's entirely appropriate that the recommendation to create a policy came from a committee, but this would be a policy of the full board. This doesn't affect rural areas any more than it does the corporate board. If the policy speaks to how the EASC or the directors for a rural area are involved in the future, that's great. There might be special consideration there, but this is a policy of the full board, and I would like the full board who's voting on this to have the full debate in front of them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director Cornfield.
Ditto to Director Anderson. I won't be supporting the amendment. I think it changes the motion too much. And I believe that it is in the board's hand. It was the board that referred this to our committee. Our committee made this forward. I have yet to hear what EASC had to say about the referral that was done to EASC to start with and what their thoughts were, but that hasn't happened. So I won't support this amendment. I think it needs to be developed by staff, come back to the board, and then it can be referred out to whomever you want.
Thank you. Director Colburn.
Director Cornfield definitely stole essentially what I was about to say. I think it's just frustrating to me the time that this is taking, the minutes that we've spent on it, that could have been better used if we would just get a draft policy and then we could refer it out to committees. I also think that on this motion on the amendment, if you're going to do an amendment like this, then it should be referred to the Municipal Services Committee and the First Nations Relations Committee, which essentially is the full board. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll go to Director Lee to wrap up, and then I'll call a question.
I would just encourage the board to support this amendment. When we get an addition to reserve proposal in a rural area, it's very different at times than in a municipal area where municipalities have control of their own services, basic services like water, sewer, and whatnot, and they can supply them. In the rural areas, we do not have those services, and we need to talk with the federal government, AATR, about how that's going to happen. And it's a different situation in the rural areas. And this morning, all that happened was that Clues made an application for an ATR and the director supported it and it went through. But okay, that doesn't mean there's not issues in some of our electoral areas regarding servicing and harmonization of bylaws and that kind of thing. So it's a very important issue for EASC to consider and to have input into.
And all the considerations will be into it. Okay, I'm going to call a question on the amendment. Anyone opposed?
I'm opposed.
Director Cornfield.
I'm opposed.
Opposed. Colburn.
Colburn's opposed. Baker's opposed.
Adams.
Adams opposed.
Mogul is opposed now.
Evans is opposed.
Baker opposed.
Baker's opposed.
Davis opposed.
Davis opposed. At my count there, Mr. Yates is defeated.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, thank you. Back to the main motion. Call questions. Anyone opposed?
May I have some clarification on the main motion then? So once the policy is drafted, it'll go back to EASC for input to the board and to the First Nations.
No, it's going to the board.
the
Going
board.
straight to the board for approval at the board
Well, the
without
board
any
can, the
input.
board could refer it out. They choose.
It's going to the board and the board can go from there. Question on the motion. Is anyone opposed?
Lee,
Abram,
Lee and Abram only? Carried. Joe? Item number 2, disaster resiliency planning, contract proposal. Motion to receive the report.
So moved.
second.
Director Adams, second
Yes.
Director Davis, I think it was. The CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sean will speak to this for us.
Through the chair to the regional board, back in the winter of 2018, the Strathcona Regional District and Village of Pemberton passed letters of support for the Justice Institute of British Columbia's application to the Vancouver Foundation for funding to modernize the Community Disaster Resiliency Plan, which will be an online framework that's available for free for any community to use across the nation. The JIBC was successful in receiving the funding, and now they have reached back out to the regional district and Village of Pemberton to provide facilitators to help them test the new platform, provide their input, make sure it meets the needs of our rural communities.
Thank you, Mr. Goodman. Are there any questions? Seeing no hands, I'll call question on receipt. Is anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. Item B, the chair and corporate officer be authorized to execute the service agreement with the Justice Institute of BC regarding the community disaster resiliency planning framework.
So moved.
Second.
Director Davis, Director Baker. Any further discussion? I'll call questions. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. Item 3, strengthening community service program grant application. Motion to receive.
So moved.
Second.
Director Kerr, Director Adams, the CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Renee will speak to this for us.
Go.
Good afternoon, Chair Unger and directors. As outlined in the report, there's a robust program to support and address unsheltered homelessness. The 9 proposed activities were developed in a collaborative effort by the Coalition Working Group and through a series of meetings. These activities are determined to fit within the narrow scope of the grant program and are eligible for 100% of the grant funding. There's no significant changes to the summary of the proposed activities since the submission of the report.
Thank you. Is there any questions? Seeing none, question on receipts. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. Item B, the regional district application for the Strength Community Search Program be outlined in April 9th, 2021 report from the CO be approved and the regional district commit to overall grant management of the application if successful.
Move approval.
Director Adams, second.
Second, Director Evans.
Director Evans, thank you. No further discussion. Director Anderson?
Just a question. Do we have any sense of when we would learn whether this application has been granted or not?
Renee?
Yes, within 90 days after the submission.
Thank you.
Go. No further questions? Question on the motion. Is anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. Item 4, COVID-19 Safe Restart Grant Application Grant for Local Governments. Motion to receive report.
Move receipt.
Director Lee, second. Seconder.
Second.
Second.
Anderson.
Director Anderson, thank you. The CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as you can see, the provincial government has provided some additional COVID relief money for regional districts and an additional $185,000. And staff is recommending that we come back with a report identifying where best these funds should be allocated to.
Thank you. Any questions? Director Davis.
Yeah, I'm just curious how this is going to work. How will it be apportioned?
Well, that's what we'll come back with a report saying what best areas should it be apportioned to. Now, there is some guidelines. It just can't be for anything. So things that have had a financial effect on COVID. So we did a report, I'm going to say about 6 months ago, with a number of recommendations. We didn't allocate all the funds, and now we have a little more money. We'll come back with a recommendation for where that money should be allocated to.
Thanks.
Director Anderson.
Thanks. Just a plug for consideration. I know that the Courtisan Fire Department, and I assume there all other fire departments, have had to buy new equipment for cleaning their turnout gear due to COVID safety requirements. And I would just ask staff to look into whether that would be a fundable activity to support. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none.
I have one, Mr. Chair, actually. So do the municipalities also get their own safe restart grants, or because I assume that this is, I'm not sure if this is for the municipalities and electoral areas, or if it's for the regional electoral areas because municipalities get their own grants. I know that Strathcona Gardens is going to take a big chunk of this probably for their COVID safe restart. Maybe our parks in the electoral areas, our parks and our wharves and whatnot. So I guess we'll hear back on the report from staff, but I'm a little confused when the government gives out grants and they don't specify whether they're also giving out the same grant to the municipalities separately.
So a quick answer to that, Mr. Chair. So we're the regional district and they've given the regional district money. So that money is up to the board to be how it's allocated. The first wave of COVID money, municipalities did get money as well. However, the money that we get goes to our munis and electoral areas as we're a board. The second wave, only regional districts got money, but again, that's to be allocated within the regional district. There's no guidelines for whether that money goes to EAs or munis. It's up to the board how to decide where the money goes to.
Okay, thank you. Is there any further questions? So, question on receipt. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. And item B, the staff report be prepared recommending how remaining COVID-19 grant funds be allocated. Need a motion?
I would move that a staff report be prepared recommending how the remaining COVID-19 grant funds could be allocated.
Thank you, Director Cornfield. Seconder?
Second, Davis.
Thank you, Director Davis. I'll call questions. Anyone opposed? Carried. On to bylaws. First bylaw, 429 broadband infrastructure loan authorization. Motion to receive the report.
Move receipt, Evans.
Second.
Director Adams, thank you. And the CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll let Tom speak to this.
Mr. Yates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is a follow-up from a previous discussion the board held, and I won't get into details because that was done out of the public eye. But basically, this is a bylaw being offered to the board, which would authorize the regional district to increase its borrowing authority for the regional broadband service, specifically for funding last mile infrastructure in a number of communities. The debt would be secured through an agreement with City West, which would be partnering for this these projects rather, and covering all costs incurred by the regional district, interest, principal, etc., in connection with the monies being borrowed. So it's quite similar to the library project for downtown Camel River. The regional district needs to take the lead in order to access the capital funding, but it is guaranteed by the partner in this enterprise. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see questions, Director Anderson.
Thank you. Two questions. The motion in front of us So I guess the staff report, so the staff report shares a motion from in camera. So the question is twofold. Under what authority do we have to share that in camera motion in the public? And then the second is in that in camera motion, it speaks to infrastructure funding for Gold River, Tassus, Sayward, and Quadra. Clearly that is for something. What can we say to the public about what it's for? What is the line here between in camera and public? I would like to know, please.
CEO.
I'll let Tom answer that.
So, Mr. Chairman, just broadly speaking, the board cannot move forward with bylaws in closed session. It has to be done publicly. By directing staff to prepare this for the board's consideration, the assumption is naturally made that this would come into a public session. To do otherwise would mean the board cannot do anything with it.
Okay, thank you.
So that sort of answers my first question, although I would think it would actually, the board would need to make a motion to rise and report on that motion. But regardless, the second question is that it speaks to specific communities. And so naturally, especially the people in those communities are going to be interested what this borrowing is for. What can be shared, please?
Well, Mr. Chair, perhaps the CAO would speak to this, but I would say that that this would be of interest to all of the electors in the region who would be basically be asked to approve the bylaw, and we're recommending through an AAP process. So there would be a process for elector approval that would ultimately have to be undertaken by the board.
Okay.
But the CAO would have much more information about specific communities and what they stand to, how they stand to benefit from this.
Right. So at the time because it's going to be an AAP, we're going to have to put out public notification of the bylaw amendments, and within that, we'll have to explain what the borrowing would be for. So the details of that would be within the bylaw explanation.
And that's when the information will come out.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Director Davis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted a bit of clarity on the alternate approval process. So does this involve the entire regional district or just the communities that are trying to get this extra infrastructure?
It's a regional broadband service of which we're amending the regional bylaw, so it would be a regional AAP.
Okay, thanks. And my other question was, I was just looking at the timeline and all this. And I saw that there was a 6-month time lag between the temporary issuing bylaw to the security issuing bylaw, which takes it well into 2022. And I'm just wondering why there is such a big lag there, because my concern is that we don't have the on-land infrastructure in place by the time the cable is brought to shore.
Yes, so municipal finance only borrows twice a year. So once you have interim borrowing authority, you short-term borrow that money. So I think the date in here is somewhere around August 11th. So effectively, once August 11th comes, we can borrow the money. You short-term borrow it for 6 months until the spring borrowing, what's issued by MFA, and then you get your long-term. So effectively, you get your authority come early August, and that's when you actually borrow the money. So we'll be way ahead of the Connected Coast.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I've got Director Abram and Director Kerr. Director Abram, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Dave, on that, on the AAP, we've had varying successes with AAPs over the years with the 2 regional districts, actually. And the whole thing came down to explaining in plain language clearly what it's for, how much it's going to cost, and in this case, the extraordinary situation of it won't cost us a cent in the end if the City West is actually paying the premiums. So will we be able to legally include all of that in our AAP advertising that will go into, I would assume, into the local papers or whatever?
Yeah, I agree. The messaging is important. So I draw a parallel to this office building when we had to go borrow $2.2 million. We did an AAP and a similar message saying we need to borrow this money. However, all the debt is covered, and I think we got 6 people that opposed. So regionally, it's an easier process because there's a greater number of people, and the messaging is important. That when people know it's not going to cost them any money, then they don't oppose it. So we'll do the same messaging for that. Similar to the library, same thing. We said we're borrowing it, but it's not going to cost you anything.
Yeah, if I could just say one more thing, the point brought up by Director Davis about, there's named communities. That may throw off that messaging. So I guess that, maybe some extra effort might have to be put in that, this is not just those 4 communities dealing with this, possibly paying for it or whatever, that it is advertised as a regional service, everybody pays.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I got Director Kerr, then Lee, so Director Kerr.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question to staff. I think this last mile project is great. But my question is, there's this is more of a technical question. There's a little company called SpaceX right now that with their disruptive technology that's going to be changing the face of the internet. So is this last mile program going to be adaptable to in the future if that becomes the way that things go?
Well, yeah, I think you're talking about Starlink when you say SpaceX.
Starlink, yep.
Yeah, and so I'll give you a few details on Starlink. Starlink offers a interrupted service, if you will, of by their own definition, 50 to 150 download speed. So 10% of what, let's say, an urban center will give. So they can't even deliver close to what you're getting, let's say, in Campbell River. The cost for your first year of service would be $3,000. You're going to pay $800 for the satellite, and then you're going to pay after tax $180 a month for 50 to 150 interrupted service. So the service is really meant for truly remote communities that have nothing. So a Starlink wouldn't be competitive to any even rural remote areas because of the cost, and the services. The cost is much higher and the service is much less.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on some of those points. I think they're just rolling it out, but I know the people that I talk to in the industry unanimously believe that is the direction that it's going to go in the future. And, for communities that they'll be able to bring it into the community with. Anyway, I'm just curious whether or not this program is going to be adaptable if, in 5 years that it makes more sense.
Thank you, Director Kerr. And I've got Director Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is through the chair to our CAO. Can you explain, we got, I think this Connected Coast got a total of $465 million in grant.
No. The SRD got 32 million.
Well, what were all the announcements about the 450 million that started the Connected Coast project? What was that about?
I've never heard 450 million. Not sure what you're talking about.
That's
it was there.
It was there.
$450 million?
Yeah, $500 million was granted from the feds and the province. And then the province. The province threw in another.
Maybe across Canada, it's been a few billion, but the SRD's Connect to Innovate grant was 32 million. City West was about 17 million.
Okay, so actually, my original question, I was assuming that there was a big gob of grant money had already gone out to either City West or or was allocated to the SRD to provide connected coast all around the coast, all around the island and up the coast.
Yeah.
And now you're saying it's only 32. And
No.
like we were told when we were asked to chip in to get the project started, you know, Area D is putting in about $39 per household and not receiving any service.
No,
And
those numbers aren't accurate.
we are part of this service, but we're not getting any service. That's what I'm saying. And I don't know where, you know, where the money is filtering from, because I know they announced when Michelle Babchuk was on chair of our board that we got 455 million.
Director Lee, Director Lee, you're incorrect. We did not get $450 million. If you,
I'll check the communications that went out from the regional district, but that's what I read.
Check the minutes, check your announcements. There's no way the regional district got $450 million.
So if we are part of a service where we're not getting any service, can we ask for a service review and have an removed from that service?
You've asked the same questions numerous times now.
Well, this is a different question. Is there a possibility of a service review?
I'm going to say no. It's a regional service. You are getting service from it. Your service to the First Nations community in your area, which is part of Area D, has a landing and has service in it. There's been many other areas within Area D that, because of Connected Coast, have seen increased and improved service from Shaw and TELUS in those areas. So I would argue heavily that Area D has received plenty of service, and Area D has not contributed $39 a home, nowhere near that.
And the addition to reserve is not in Area D. It is part of a reserve, a federal reserve. So it's not part of our community anymore. Once they become a reserve, they're not our community.
I'll leave that with you, but I consider the Khaleesi
So,
lands
but the
in Area D.
taxpayers in Area
Point of
D,
order, Mr. Chair, work significantly off topic.
taxpayers are not in Area
Director
D
Lee,
are paying for
Director
this
Lee.
and they're not getting anything.
Director Lee, it's enough. Thank you. Don't see any speakers. We're going to move on. We got a question on receipt. Is anyone opposed?
Lee,
Director Lee's opposed. I see no further, so I'll call that carried. On to item B, the bylaw 429, being a bylaw to amend the borrowing authority for the regional broadband infrastructure service, be now introduced and read for the first time.
Move B.
Second.
I think it was Director Baker and Director Cornfield I heard.
Davis.
Discussion? Seeing none, call question. Anyone opposed?
Lee,
Director Lee's opposed. No further. Call carried. Item C, the
Move
move.
C.
Director Cornfield, second.
Evans, second.
I think that was Director Evans, I believe. Any further discussion? Is anyone opposed?
Lee,
Kill. Director Lee's opposed. Don't see anyone else. I'll call that carried.
Move
Item
D.
D, Director Cornfield.
Second.
Director Davis. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call questions. Anyone opposed?
Lee,
Director Lee.
Move E.
I'll call it carried, and he's been moved by Director Cornfield, second by
Davis.
Director Davis. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call questions. Anyone opposed?
Director Lee,
Director Lee. I don't see any further. I'll call carried. On to correspondence, we have 1, 2, 3, 5 items.
Please, 2 and 4, please.
Remove 2 and 4.
Please.
Okay, so you want to move
Not
1,
remove them, pull them.
yeah, 1, 3, and 5 is moved for receipt.
Sure.
5 will also need to be redirected.
Okay, so item 1, Sabellus installation. Motion receive.
move receipt.
Seconder? Director Lee, Director Baker, thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call question. Is anyone opposed? Carried. Item T, go to the biosolids facility, motion received.
So moved.
Moved Director Lee, Director Abram. Any discussion?
Yes.
Director
Yes,
Cornfield.
Mr. Chair.
I just wanted to say congratulations on getting a new biosolids facility. I think you've got things under control for your community, and really good to see your approval.
Okay, thank you, Director Cornfield. Director Abram.
Yes, thank you. And that's one of the first things I wanted to say was congratulations to the Village of Gold. And I also wanted to direct a question to our CAO. Dave, did we apply to the fund to this for the QCO facility since it covers future wastewater facilities?
We have an application already in for QCO sewer.
For the particular one?
Off the top of my head, I don't know the name of it, but it doesn't make any sense to, in parallel, to make, applications to competing funds.
No, I just want to make sure that we've got one into some fund, one that has a lot of money.
Thank you, Director Abram. Director Lee.
I'm sorry, I can't figure out how to lower my hand.
Oh, okay. Oh, you're gone now.
Sorry. It's
That's fine,
gone? Good.
Okay. Any other discussion? I'll just quickly add on. Yes, it's very nice to see this project be completed. It was started about 5 years ago. We had received our grant money. We had a quote come in for around $650,000 for the whole project. Within a year, our project went from $650,000 to about $1.4 million because the contractor we hired forgot to do about the electrical portion of the building that had to be built. So we scrapped it. And then 2 years ago, when our new CO came in, we started the project over again, and I believe the cost come to us of around $840,000. So we did a big saving from the original one, and we redid everything. So yes, it's very nice. The first major project in Gold River for many, many years. So it was nice to see completed. See nothing else, I'll call question. Anyone opposed? Carried. Item 3, anything on rural recovery program? Motion received.
So moved.
Director Lee, second.
Second.
Director Davis, any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call questions. Anyone opposed? Carried. Item 4, UBC membership. Motion received.
So moved.
Like to move receipt, and I have a subsequent motion.
Director Abram and Director Davis, any discussion?
Yeah, I remember a number of years ago directing staff to just automatically renew our UBCM membership every year. This letter is requesting renewal. Is that direction from the board still applicable?
I'll go CO.
Sorry, I missed that.
My memory is many years ago, the board gave direction to automatically renew our UBCM membership every year. This letter is requesting renewal. Is that board direction still standing?
We chatted about that the other day, and I'll have to check into it because we think there might have been a limited time. It was for a couple years. I'm not sure if it was ongoing, so we were going to look into that. I'm uncertain, but I'll find out.
I have
So if it is uncertain and you need a motion to renew this year, that would be advisable because I think it was unlimited. So please let us know if you need that direction.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, thank you. Director Abram.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to move.
No, we're on receipt. We're only on receipt.
We did receive, I thought.
We haven't voted.
We haven't voted on it yet.
We haven't finished discussion.
All right, I am not opposed to receipt.
Okay. Director Cornfield.
Thank you, Chair. I've got some concerns, and I would hate to see us join an organization without having some discussion every year. The recent one we got was from the city of Vernon, and it's regarding hydro's rates for LED lights going up, which basically is going to cost every community about $40,000 a year more. And they've had to take intervener status along with Prince George, and so far UBCM has not responded when and Vernon was asking for our assistance to request UBCM take that intervener status and take that on in order to represent all communities in the province on that rate increase. And to date, we haven't got an answer. So I would hate to see us give a blanket one when if they're not doing things to represent us. And I think it needs to be talked every year. So I have no problem with the receipt of the motion, and those are just some concerns I have.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else on receipt?
Okay.
Nothing else on receipt. So on receipt, I'll call questions. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. Director Abram, we have a subsequent.
Yeah, the subsequent would be that the SRD renew its membership in the UBCM for 2022, I guess it is.
2021.
Second, Director Evans.
2021, whatever. One of those years.
Well, it says regarding membership for 2021.
Yeah, I would say 2021. Yeah.
Well, then that's what I wanted to say. It's 2021.
Thank you. Director Abram, and it was Director Evans seconded. Any discussion with Director Anderson?
Yeah, I would just like it to reference, I believe, a standing motion that we have that we just renew every year. So I wonder if Director Abram would accept a friendly that just said the SRD renew membership with UBCM 2021 and that staff check previous motion to see whether this needs to come back to us every year or not and report back, something to that effect.
Mr. Chair, what I can do, like if the board wants to vote on this motion for 2021, I'll bring a staff report forward on where we lie with UBCM and whether the resolution is ongoing or for annual review, if that's okay.
Okay, you okay with that, Director Anderson?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on the motion?
Mr. Chair. Yes, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm not okay with the motion. I are amending the motion.
You're not amending yet.
We should.
It's not being amended.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not being amended, but what I'm saying is that I would like the motion to just pass cleanly as it is. And if Dave comes back with a report that says, hey, we don't need to do this, it's good forever, then fine. Then we go that direction.
That's what we're doing.
Don't.
Pardon?
That's what we're doing, yeah.
Okay. Question on the motion. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. Item 5, request for financial assistance, Friends of Strathcona Park. Motion to receive.
So moved.
Second. Director Anderson, I believe it was. And discussion. Director Cornfield.
Tell me you want to put the agenda back up?
Can staff answer me, how was this grant and aid to be apportioned? And is it a weighted vote?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, in the past, where the board has provided grants through on a regional basis, and I don't know if that's the intention here, but if it is, that has come out of the general administration budget with the apportionment on assessment basis as for all general administration matters.
Okay, so roughly, if I can follow up, that would be, what is it, 62 or 72% would be levied against Campbell River?
I think we're 62.
Okay, and I won't, yeah, well, we're just on receipt, right?
That's right, correct.
Thank you.
Director Anderson.
Thank you. I'm just curious to know, how this landed here. It seems like this application was sent to Director Abram, who then asked that this get put on the board rather than EASC agenda. It would seem that rather than landing on the board agenda, simply the applicant should have been advised that this application should be sent to some or all of the electoral area rural directors. I'm just curious how it got here, because it doesn't seem like the right place for this to land, unless it truly was the intent that a regional allocation be considered.
I'll go
Either
CEO.
Director Abram or CAO.
Mr. Chairman, is simply correspondence coming to the board. The chair for the EASC did not feel it was appropriate for that committee to be dealing with, and so the only opportunity really is for the board. And if the board wishes to refer it to some other location, that is absolutely fine.
Okay.
So I just don't think that it's an appropriate request to come to the board when grant and aids are always dealt with by electoral area directors and indeed EASC. I've got slapped on the hand for bringing things to the board and not to EASC, so it just seems very inconsistent. I would suggest that the Friends of Strathcona Park be advised to refer their request to individual rural area directors, and would happily make such as a subsequent after receipt.
Okay, after receipt, you can do that. Thank you. Director Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Area D, I believe this year was supporting Friends of Strathcona Park with $3,000. They build and upgrade information kiosks and do online web presence for, instructions around the park. There's Friends of Strathcona Park and there's Strathcona Wilderness Committee, and both of them have applied to Area D in the past and got a few thousand here and there. And it's always been done through EASC, and I think it's important to continue to go through EASC because, each director may be getting requests from these organizations, and we need to, all the 4 electoral directors should be aware of the grants that are coming into us. And this is quite a substantial request for $10,000 for Strathcona Park. And I believe because it's a provincial park, that money for the purposes that they're requesting should come from the province rather than from the regional district. I can see a small, information kiosk or something coming from us, but not a major project within the park.
Okay.
That's mapping and whatnot.
Okay.
Point of order, Mr. Chair, we're on receipt.
That's correct.
So if
So
someone
on
wants
receipt.
to make a motion afterwards, then we can have debate on the merits. We're on receipt.
Thank you. I concur. Director Abram.
Okay, on receipt, was asked, why did it come to the board instead of EASC? Came to the board because this particular application has come to the board every year. And it's either been funded or not funded by general administration. And as far as I was concerned, it was perhaps an end run, perhaps just a screw up in their administrative issues or whatever. But Friends of Strathcona Park has been funded in the past by the board. I know that Director Lee has given them money. I have not given them money. And it is, as far as I'm concerned, a regional issue. If the region doesn't want to fund it or whatever, that's fine. But that's why it came to this board as opposed to EASC.
Okay, thank you. Director Adams.
Thank you, Chair. Just on receipt, I would certainly want some more details on this. Appreciate the comments of the other directors, but this seems like a very undetailed request. I would want to know such things as what alternate access routes are they considering? Where would positions be from? Have they received any funds to date, and do they have a budget? And what is the economic return that they anticipate for the Strathcona Regional District? Those are just some comments that, if we are going to entertain this, would want to be considered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Giles. Director Anderson, are you ready for a subsequent, or do you want to speak?
No, I just wanted to speak briefly because I appreciate Director Abram answering my question about why it's here, because I don't think it's likely that Area A, B, or C would fund this, or to any extent, perhaps Area D. So if indeed this is something of interest to the entire board, I suggest that we don't just refer it out to the various electoral areas directors who probably won't fund it too much, and that the board, as Director Adams has suggested, perhaps ask for further information. So I would send it, sort of suggest back over to the full board that we either ask for more information or do nothing further with it rather than punt it back. Thanks.
Okay, we'll decide that after Rajeet. Director Cornfield.
Sorry, Chair. I will maybe wait until the other part comes up because there's a lot of information in what they submitted.
Okay, thank you. Director Davis.
Just a quick question. Does this span more than one electoral area? Strathcona Park, that is.
Theo?
3 regional districts, many electoral areas.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Cool. So Director Lee, do you have your hand up, or you just?
No, but I would just like to say it is a provincial park.
Okay.
And should go, the funding for major projects like this should go through the province Ministry of Environment.
You've stated that, yes. Okay. On receipt, anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. Is there subsequent? Hearing none, we'll move on. Members' reports, management report, new business, nothing. 10-minute items, nothing. Item T, closed session, report from the CEO be received.
Move receipt of the CAO's report.
Director Lee, second by? Seconder?
Second, Director Evans.
Director Evans, thank you. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? Carried. Item B, the closed meeting be held immediately following the termination of the public meeting to consider matters deemed to fall within parameters of the subject section 9.1 FKNO 92B of the Community Charter.
So moved.
Seconder?
Second.
Director Lee, Director Davis. Anyone opposed? Carried. Termination?
Move termination.
Director Wally, second.
Anderson, second.
Director Anderson, any discussion?
Just question on it.
Yes.
I have no closed agenda.
Should have.
Neither do I.
The only thing it showed on my computer was just the open agenda.
Yeah, but you just emailed it to you.
Sorry? So no one's had time to present, so I don't even know what it's about.
No, I have access to the closed agenda, have had for days.
Yeah,
I haven't.
Well, it was mailed out to everybody.
I have it.
Well,
I have it.
Was it mailed or posted?
No, posted.
Mr. Chairman,
was
we
posted.
publish the
Hang on.
agendas on the website. All directors should have access as of Friday evening, the weekend prior to the meeting. The actual invitation to the in-camera session will not be sent out until the actual day of the meeting, and you should have that sitting in the box to actually join.
I just got that part now, but I haven't seen the other agenda.
And well, Director Cornfield, it seems like you're the only one.
Are we terminated from the open?
We are.
Not yet, we aren't. We got to call a question.
Question
Do we have
called.
to leave that? Do we have to leave that meeting?
Yeah,
Yes.
leave this and then, yeah.
Did you call the question, Mr. Chair?
Question of the cause. Anyone opposed? Hearing none, carried. See you in a minute on the closed.